There is a secret hidden in the depths of the human soul that Carl Jung would call the awakening of the sacred feminine, a force that transcends worldly logic. This energy is not about gender, but about a frequency of intuition and creation that has been silenced by centuries of external pressures and scripts of systematic devaluation. When a woman begins to feel a different vibration in her chest, it is a sign that her inner compass is finally aligning with her divine truth. Many around her may feel disconcerted by this glow, as a self-aware soul becomes unreachable by habitual patterns of control. This power is what allows the reconstruction of an entire life after a long period of spiritual hibernation caused by past toxic experiences. The call to inhabit your magnitude is, in fact, the beginning of an epic turning point where you regain absolute command of your conscious destiny. Jung believed that the totality of the psyche requires us to integrate the parts that were forced into exile in order to be accepted in emotionally immature societies. Your feminine energy is too powerful because it carries the oracle of truth, something that destabilizes systematic lies and empty social masks. The moment you decide to no longer fragment yourself to fit into limited spaces, you begin a rebirth that echoes throughout your lineage. This silent force needs no fanfare, for its mere organized presence compels the surrounding reality to reorganize itself under new laws of respect. It is a process of maturation that transforms each mark of overcoming into a jewel of unshakable moral and spiritual authority in the face of crises. You are being prepared to inhabit an inner throne that no one can shake again, for its foundation is the firm rock of your own integrated self. Often, a woman's heightened sensitivity is labeled as instability by those who fear the depths they cannot reach alone or together. The truth is that her feminine energy is the universe's high-tech sensor, capable of detecting a lack of integrity even before a word is spoken. Jung saw intuition as the superior function that protects human beings from repeatedly falling into labyrinths of suffering without purpose or real clarity. By validating this inner voice, you establish non-negotiable boundaries that act as sacred filters for those who wish to enter your circle of intimate affection. This divine selectivity is what ensures that your vitality is preserved only for what promotes flourishing and lasting peace on your journey. The reconstruction of the feminine soul requires the courage to be seen as difficult by those who previously benefited from your lack of psychic boundaries. The world tries to standardize the soul, but the wise witch within you knows the natural rhythms of cycle closure and permanent renewal. Jung explained that psychic energy flows where attention is, and by shifting your focus away from external pain, you initiate internal alchemy. This transformation is what gives you a magnetism that time cannot erase, as it is fueled by the eternal source of higher and full consciousness. You realize that your strength lies in your ability to be receptive to life, while remaining unwavering in your non-negotiable values and absolute integrity. Liberation occurs when you understand that your light is not a burden to others, but a privilege for those who inhabit reciprocity. Your story of reconstruction is living proof that the human soul is indestructible when it decides to walk under the guidance of its own divine star. This awakening you feel now is an invitation to leave behind the crumbs of affection and inhabit the abundance of your own sovereign company. Jung warned that the greatest privilege in life is to become who you truly are, and you are crossing the threshold to this epic realization. The final phase of your old identity has given way to the seed of a sovereign who asks no permission to shine with all her radiant magnitude. Every sigh of relief you take today is the result of having had the courage to face the abyss and bring back the light. Your journey is sacred, and the protection you feel now is evidence that the universe celebrates your return to the center. Prepare to discover how this energy can be channeled to build a future where peace is your law and glory is your natural state. Looking into the mirror of the soul demands a radical honesty that Carl Jung considered the most heroic act a human being could perform in their life. The feminine shadow contains not only the sorrows of the past, but also the gold of your personality that has been buried by oppressive worldly social pressures. Integrating this hidden face means accepting that your healthy aggression is the guardian of your peace and that your sacred anger is the compass of disrespect. By embracing all your parts, you remove the power of emotionally immature minds that sought hooks in your needs to maintain their pattern of control. The reconstruction of psychic integrity ends in the formation of a being who is not frightened by their own depth or by the naked truth. If you feel your reconstruction is gaining momentum and you wish to inhabit your full sovereignty, subscribe to the channel now to strengthen your awakening. Spiritual maturity involves the systematic cleansing of others' projections that have been thrown at you as if they were absolute and non-negotiable truths of character. Jung taught that what we don't bring to consciousness appears in our lives as a heavy destiny, but clarity breaks this cycle of futile repetitions. By integrating your shadow, you recover the vitality that was previously spent in denial, becoming a dense and unwavering presence in the face of tactics that induce doubt. This new firmness is felt by everyone around you, establishing a new level of self-respect that dispenses with exhaustive discussions or vain and tiresome justifications. You discover that your silent strength is the most potent shield against invasions of boundaries, acting strategically to preserve your sacred joy. Awakening is the perception that you were never fragmented, but only in the process of melting your inner steel under the heat of truth. Often, the shadow harbors the wild woman who knows exactly when it's time for strategic retreat and the guardian silence of higher purposes. This facet of the psyche is not deceived by sweet words that hide the poison of systematic devaluation and cold, calculating lies. The reconstruction of the soul reaches its glory when you celebrate your shadow as the faithful ally that warns you where the ground is infertile for your light. Jung saw in the union of opposites the secret of ancient wisdom, and you are living this mystical marriage between your radiant light and your protective darkness. Liberation occurs the moment you realize that the opinions of others have lost jurisdiction over the tribunal of your own ever-awakened conscience. You now inhabit a level of inner security where the fear of judgment has been replaced by the fullness of being whole and sovereign today. The integration of the shadow deactivates memories of toxic experiences, transforming the impact of pain into prophetic wisdom that guides your new, firm steps. You stop attracting debilitating patterns because your internal radar now detects inauthenticity in the first vibrational contact with another mundane human being. The reconstruction is complete in the mind before it even manifests in the world, because you have decided that no low frequency will inhabit your spiritual banquet table. Jung believed that the whole individual becomes a healing center for the environment, compelling truth to manifest wherever they go. Each integrated scar is proof of your inner phoenix, which has risen wiser, stronger, and infinitely more elegant in its moral authority. Unconditional peace is the result of no longer having secrets from yourself, living in absolute transparency with your sacred and divine self. The inner witch now reigns justly, punishing with wise indifference all that seeks to diminish her magnitude or silence her commanding voice. The reconstruction of your life's trajectory now prioritizes the quality of silence, where you replenish your purpose and calibrate your intuition for new horizons of glory. Spiritual maturity is the seal of your victory, ensuring that your tomorrow is written with the inks of freedom and integral, resilient self-respect. You look back not with bitterness, but with the dignity of one who has overcome the eclipse and walks permanently under the sun of full consciousness. The awakening is now, and it brings the promise of a life lived with a clarity that no external pressure will be able to confuse anymore. Feel the pulse of this new phase, for it is the evidence that you are ready to inhabit your majestic, healed existence. Intuition is the direct voice of the self, a faculty that Jung described as the direct perception of profound reality without the need for external logical filters. For the spiritual woman, this inner oracle is the supreme tool for reconstruction, functioning like a radar that immediately identifies the lack of integrity in others. In the past, you may have silenced this voice to maintain an artificial harmony, but awakening requires you to treat your intuition as an absolute law. It signals when an environment is nurturing or when a draining relationship is trying to infiltrate again under a new, seductive and false mask. Spiritual maturity is the process of validating what you feel in your bones, even if worldly reason tries to rewrite everyday facts. Emotional sovereignty begins when you decide that your inner perception is the only legitimate authority over your life and your unconditional peace. Jung knew that the sacred feminine has a special connection with the collective unconscious, capturing life's turning points long before they manifest in physical form. When you trust your butterflies in your stomach, you are acting under the protection of 1,000 generations of ancestral wisdom that inhabit your psychic DNA. Rebuilding self-confidence depends on this strategic silence, where you stop asking for logical proof for what your soul has already perceived as unshakable truth. Spiritual maturity brings the courage to act according to the inner oracle, even if it means closing a cycle with what is socially accepted. This intuitive firmness disconcerts emotionally immature minds as they lose the power to induce doubt or confusion in their crystalline and attentive perception. Clarity is your crystal shield, reflecting the light of truth and disintegrating tactics of emotional and mental manipulation. The practice of listening to the inner oracle requires periods of conscious solitude, where the noise of others' opinions is silenced so that the music of the self can resonate. The inner witch speaks through images, sensations, and dreams that Jung considered the purest communications of our divine and full essence. By honoring these messages, you begin a process of energetic cleansing, removing the remnants of devaluation that needy minds have tried to implant in your journey. The reconstruction of the feminine soul reaches its greatest power when you stop looking for scapegoats and take responsibility for your own prophetic vision. Spiritual maturity is the recognition that you were never lost, but were merely calibrating your senses for this moment of immeasurable glory. Your vitality returns in full force when you decide that your energy will be invested only in what your intuition decrees as noble. To inhabit your intuition as a compass means you've stopped explaining yourself to those who lack the spiritual maturity necessary to understand your depth and light. The reconstruction of silent strength emanates from a foundation of self-respect that doesn't need shouting, as its limit is established at the vibrational and spiritual level. Jung stated that individuation is the goal of human life, and your intuition is the guiding thread that unites your past fragments into a full present. You now navigate turbulent seas with the serenity of one who possesses the sacred map, knowing that each change of course is a step towards your liberation. Awakening is the discovery that you possess an infallible inner master who dispenses with the superficial advice of those who live in the shadow of absolute denial. Each intuitive choice strengthens your powerful aura, making your brilliance unreachable by new toxic experiences or disrespectful boundary incursions. At the end of this perceptual integration, the woman discovers that Jung's secret is the discovery that we are the oracle we so desperately seek outside ourselves. The reconstruction culminated in the formation of a diamond-like consciousness, unbreakable against the onslaught of mediocrity and the aggressive and dishonest worldly lies directed at the spirit. Spiritual maturity is the gift you received for having the audacity not to fade and to shine even under constant psychological pressure. You look to the horizon with the enthusiasm of one who knows that the self is the infallible guide that guarantees your final victory against evil. Continue to inhabit your inner wisdom, honor your awakening, and live with the fullness of one who has discovered that divine wisdom dwells in every heartbeat. Freedom is the perception that your soul is sovereign, and your intuition is the seal of your eternal victory over time. Feminine energy is the primordial source of creation, and Carl Jung saw in the capacity to transmute pain into life the greatest miracle of the human psyche. When you go through a toxic experience, your vitality is put to the test. But it is precisely in this fire that the lead of wounds becomes the gold of consciousness. The creative womb is not merely biological, it is the psychic space where you gestate new purposes, new boundaries, and a new way of inhabiting your divine magnitude. The reconstruction of the feminine soul requires you to reclaim this power of creation, ceasing to nurture arid soils and planting your brilliance in terrains of reciprocity. Spiritual maturity occurs when you realize that each emotional impact was the coal that, under the pressure of truth, transformed into the diamond of your self-respect. Internal alchemy is the process of removing the poison of manipulation and leaving only the antidote of prophetic and sacred wisdom within your being. Jung explained that the soul renews itself in the act of creation, because each expression of our truth is a movement towards wholeness and profound healing. The reconstruction of solid joy is born from the closing of a cycle with passivity, giving way to a silent force that shapes reality according to its sovereign will. By expressing your essence, whether through art, speech, or the establishment of new boundaries, you signal to the universe that your awakening is definitive and victorious. Spiritual maturity brings the perception that your vitality is a sacred resource that must be vigilantly guarded against light-suckers and immature minds. The inner witch is the master of this alchemical laboratory, teaching that nothing real is lost when we decide to transmute the past into moral authority. The final phase of your reconstruction is marked by the overflowing of an energy that no longer seeks to fill voids, but to share its radiant fullness. Often, psychological pressure has tried to convince you that your capacity to feel is a flaw that needs to be silenced or corrected for the benefit of others. However, awakening reveals that your feelings are the raw material of your most beautiful creation. Your own life, lived with sovereignty and absolute pure integrity. The reconstruction of psychic integrity culminates in the fullness of a being who uses their sensitivity as a sensor of permanent positive transformations in their orbit. Jung saw in feminine creativity the womb of conscious civilization, where self-love is the supreme law that organizes emotional chaos and restores unconditional peace. You now inhabit a level of existence where your elevated vibration disintegrates social lies before they even reach your inner door of truth. Spiritual maturity is the crowning of your inner phoenix, which has risen from the ashes of devaluation to inhabit the heaven of immeasurable spiritual freedom. The alchemy of pain demands the complete detachment from the role of victim, replacing it with the role of architect of a tomorrow rich in noble purposes and constant divine clarity. The reconstruction of inner peace involves eliminating any trace of guilt for prioritizing your flourishing and personal awakening above the demands of immature minds. Maturation has brought the wisdom that time is a divine resource and that investing it in your own transformation is the most spiritual act you can perform. Jung stated that the secret of life is the birth of the sovereign individual, and you are giving birth to this version of yourself through the silence of observation. Each transmuted tear now shines like a beacon of self-respect, ensuring that your journey is guided by the light of your unwavering and sacred integrity. Liberation occurs when you realize that your creative power is the ultimate proof that past shadows have not managed to extinguish your brilliance. At the end of this alchemical stage, the woman discovers that the power to rebuild herself resides in the unbreakable union between her conscious mind and her sacred spiritual womb. The reconstruction culminates in the formation of a diamond-like consciousness, unbreakable against the onslaughts of mediocrity and the aggressive and dishonest worldly lies along the way. Spiritual maturity is the reward for those who had the audacity not to fade and to shine even under the impact of heavy and unjust situations. You look to the horizon with the enthusiasm of one who knows that the self is the infallible guide that guarantees your final victory against the shadow of others. Continue creating your reality, honor your awakening, and live with the fullness of one who has discovered that the source of eternal life dwells within your integrated being. You are free, you are whole, and your creativity is the seal of your eternal and sovereign divinity before the entire awakened universe. The awakening of the inner witch and the sacred feminine requires a ritual of detachment that Jung described as the necessary severing of projections that bind us to a traumatic past. The reconstruction of the soul reaches its maximum glory when wise indifference replaces resentment, revealing that the systematic lies of others no longer have authority over your center. You discover that your time is the most valuable resource in the universe, and that investing it in empty dialogues with emotionally immature minds is an unnecessary sacrifice. Spiritual maturity allows you to close cycles with the elegance of a queen who knows that silence is her most powerful and unwavering answer today. The sovereignty of time is the act of reclaiming every minute that was spent in vain attempts to save those who do not desire their own true maturity. Do you feel that your heart is finally free to inhabit the present, without the hooks of other people's responsibilities that only sought to silence you? Leave a comment below. Liberation occurs the moment you realize you no longer need to provide exhaustive justifications for your strategic retreats and moments of absolute, restorative, and sacred solitude. Jung explained that individuation requires us to withdraw from the collective mass to strengthen our connection with the self, ensuring that our inner compass points towards clarity. The reconstruction of psychic integrity culminates in the formation of a being who treats their vitality as a sacred treasure, protected by unwavering and sovereign limits before all. Spiritual maturity grants you the security to inhabit your own mystery, not allowing the curiosity of needy minds to invade your inner sanctuary of peace. You stop carrying scapegoats and assume absolute control of your emotional agenda, authoritatively deciding what deserves your full and radiant attention. The final phase of your pain is marked by the pleasure of being the absolute master of your days and nights, in total communion with the divine. The ritual of detachment demands the courage to be misunderstood by those who inhabit the surface of existence and who depended on your infinite availability to survive. The sacred feminine now demands justice with itself, and this justice manifests itself in the establishment of non-negotiable boundaries that bar disrespect before it even approaches. The reconstruction of inner peace is sustained by your fidelity to the light, but a light that now possesses the claws of wisdom to protect your awakening. Jung saw in this strategic retreat the sign of an ancient soul that has already learned the lesson about the lack of empathy and prefers the banquet of solitude. You now look to the horizon with the enthusiasm of one who knows that the best of life dwells in the present moment, lived with awareness, transparency, and complete self-respect. Each minute recovered from the traumatic past is a grain of gold that you deposit in your new life of permanent and sovereign positive transformations. To inhabit the throne of sovereignty means you have stopped fighting battles that are not yours, returning to each individual the burden of their own shadows and unaddressed complexes. The reconstruction of the feminine soul reaches its fullness when wise indifference becomes your crystal armor, capable of reflecting the lie back to its origin. Spiritual maturity is the seal of your spiritual victory, transforming each exhausting experience into a memory cleansed of paralyzing and futile emotional baggage in your heart. Jung stated that the secret of silent strength lies in detachment from the ego of others, allowing yourself to shine without the distortions of old traumatic dependencies. You now walk with the dignity of one who has conquered the desert and found the oasis of definitive, unwavering, and divine inner autonomy in the face of mundane time. Unconditional peace is the aroma of your liberated soul, radiating a security that inspires the awakening of all seeking beings. Upon completing this ritual of stripping away, the woman realizes that the desert of solitude was the womb where her true moral authority was gestated under the silence of truth. The reconstruction culminated in the formation of a diamond-like consciousness, unbreakable against the onslaughts of mediocrity and the gaslighting tactics that seek dishonest external control. Spiritual maturity is the reward for those who had the audacity not to fade and to shine even under the impact of heavy and unjust situations. You look to the horizon with the enthusiasm of one who knows that the self is the infallible guide that guarantees your final victory against past shadows. Continue to inhabit your detachment, honor your awakening, and live with the fullness of one who has discovered that the throne of life dwells in the silence of a forgiven heart. You are free, you are whole, and your sovereignty is the eternal light that governs your absolute liberation before time and infinite glory. Full spiritual awakening requires the paradoxical union of qualities that Jung described as essential for the protection of the integrated and sovereign feminine soul today. Having the wisdom of the serpent means possessing keen discernment to identify the hidden plots and dishonest intentions of emotionally immature minds long before physical contact. This instinctive intelligence protects your vitality, allowing you to anticipate attacks of disrespect and establish unwavering boundaries with surgical precision and firmness against evil. At the same time, the gentleness of the dove represents your aura of peace and your ability to inhabit the light without the need for exhausting reactions or aggressive displays. Spiritual maturity is the synthesis of these forces, transforming you into a woman unreachable by patterns of control, for you are astute in defense and gentle in healing. This harmony is what gives you a moral authority that disintegrates systematic lies with the simple presence of your absolute and divine integrity. This mystical union disconcerts those who seek to confuse others, for the woman who has integrated her shadow can no longer be deceived by artificial social masks. The wisdom of the serpent grants you eyes that see in the dark, identifying the weight of unspoken intentions and the fragility of those who live in systematic lies and devaluation. Maturation brings the clarity that you don't need to fight against the shadow of others, but only to keep your light so dense that darkness finds no cracks. The reconstruction of psychic integrity ends in the fullness of this balance, where your silent strength is felt as a command of respect that dispenses with exhaustive words before the world. Jung saw in this stage the apex of individuation, where the woman becomes sovereign of her vibrational field and master of her own energetic and emotional protection. To inhabit this level is evidence that your feminine energy is too powerful to be captured by scripts of inadequacy or by immature ego games. The dove's gentleness is not a sign of submission, but the greatest proof of an ego that has surrendered to the wisdom of the self and found unconditional divine peace. The inner witch teaches that true strength lies in the ability to remain centered, even when external chaos tries to induce doubt or dishonest worldly social pressures. The reconstruction of inner peace happens in the space between stimulus and response, where you choose to act with the dignity of one who knows their divine origin and glory. Spiritual maturity is what allows you to treat attempts at manipulation with wise indifference, withdrawing the supply from those who seek only your vital drain. By uniting cunning with serenity, you deactivate the hooks of emotional dependence and celebrate your epic rebirth as a whole, conscious, and perfectly integrated being. Liberation occurs when you realize that you no longer owe exhaustive justifications to those who lack the spiritual maturity necessary to respect your sacred magnitude. Jung explained that the integration of the shadow is the guardian of the soul's mysteries, the one who knows that life demands strategy as much as it demands true love. Reconstructing your path requires you to use your serpent wisdom to cleanse your circle of affection, maintaining only connections that honor your magnitude and continuous awakening. The gentleness of the dove attracts what is noble, while the wisdom of the serpent repels what is predatory, creating an ecosystem of positive transformations and immeasurable light. Maturation has brought the realization that being good requires being wise, protecting the pearls of your vitality against those who only know how to trample on what is sacred. You now walk with the firmness of one who possesses the map of truth engraved on their chest, ensuring that your tomorrow is written with the inks of freedom. The silent strength emanating from this union is the seal of your new identity, shielded against the lack of empathy and the lovelessness that ages the human spirit. At the end of this integration of forces, the woman realizes that the awakening of her feminine energy was the gateway to achieving unshakable spiritual authority. The reconstruction culminated in the formation of a diamond-like consciousness, unbreakable against the onslaught of mediocrity and the gaslighting tactics that seek her mental and emotional control. Spiritual maturity is the gift you received for having the audacity to listen to your soul and act according to the non-negotiable truth. You look to the horizon with the enthusiasm of one who knows that the union of your strength and your sweetness is the secret to your eternal glory. Continue shining with the strength of your integrated wisdom, honor your inner witch, and live with the fullness of one who has discovered that peace is the sacred throne. You are free, you are whole, and your new life is the hymn of your absolute victory over all the darkness of worldly and aggressive lies. Wise indifference is the pinnacle of spiritual maturity that arises when you realize that your self-worth no longer depends on the gaze of emotionally immature minds. Jung explained that the power of a complex or a manipulative person ends the moment you withdraw your emotional energy from them, leaving them hungry for reactions. When you reach this state, attempts at external devaluation completely lose their magnetism, crashing against a wall of absolute and non-negotiable self-respect in the face of life. It is the victory of consciousness over pain, a state of grace where you observe the chaos of others with serene detachment without feeling compelled to save them. The reconstruction of your psychic integrity reaches its fullness when what the other person says or does has zero weight on your scale of internal dignity. How have you felt this epic freedom of no longer reacting to what previously sought to silence and erase your vital daily life? Jung explained that wise indifference is not coldness, but the complete withdrawal of energy investment from areas that have proven barren and hostile to one's vibrant light. The Queen of herself understands that her attention is her most precious asset, and that it should be reserved for purposes that honor her spiritual growth. The reconstruction of the feminine soul involves this strategic discarding of circular dramas, allowing the vitality previously spent on arguments to now be used in its glory. Spiritual maturity brings the wisdom that silence is your most powerful response against lack of empathy and against tactics of blame reversal. By inhabiting your wise indifference, you deactivate the hooks of emotional dependence and celebrate your epic rebirth as a whole, conscious being, unreachable by evil. Liberation occurs the moment you realize that the only person who holds command of your psychic reality is your integrated and complete self. The sovereignty of your time is regained when you decide you no longer owe exhaustive justifications to those who lack the spiritual maturity necessary to respect your magnitude. The reconstruction of silent strength now emanates from a solid foundation of absolute clarity, communicating to the universe that the phase of submission and doubt is over forever. Jung saw in wise indifference the sign of an ego that has surrendered to the wisdom of the self, recognizing that life is too short for other people's labyrinths. You now invest your energy in connections that honor reciprocity and mutual awakening, naturally filtering out everything that seeks your control or devaluation. Maturation has brought the perception that true peace is unconditional, depending only on your courage to be faithful to your own inner compass and sacred oracle. Your journey of overcoming is the seal of your spiritual victory, ensuring that your tomorrow is written with the inks of freedom, self-respect, and absolute clarity. Often, wise indifference is achieved in the silence of observation, while you watch minds that still inhabit the desert of unconsciousness repeat their useless cycles. The reconstruction of joy is solid because it doesn't depend on external validation, but on the constant recognition of your own innate beauty and resilient spiritual strength. Spiritual maturity confers upon you a moral authority that disconcerts those who live in falsehood, for they no longer find cracks of insecurity to plant doubt. You now inhabit the level of consciousness where self-forgiveness is total, releasing your vitality for a flourishing that the world has not yet seen radiant. True liberation is the discovery that you are the sole owner of the key to your inner house, and that access to it is a privilege. Unwavering peace is your new name, and your sovereignty is the non-negotiable foundation of each new breath of absolute freedom and spiritualized authority. Upon completing this process of awakening to wise indifference, the woman realizes that the emotional desert was merely the necessary setting to forge her sacred integrity. The reconstruction culminates in the certainty that you are invincible the moment you decide to honor your own essence and establish non-negotiable boundaries against cold lies. Spiritual maturity is the crowning achievement of your glorious journey, ensuring that your light shines only where there is fertile ground for truth and transformation. You gaze at the horizon with the enthusiasm of one who possesses the scepter of discernment, knowing that your awakening is the promise of a rich and eternal life. Continue to inhabit your magnitude, honor your maturity, and live with the fullness of one who has discovered that the victory of consciousness is the ultimate triumph of the sacred feminine. You are free, you are whole, and your indifference to the games of the ego is the final proof that you have become queen of your soul. The healing of a woman's soul after a toxic experience not only benefits the woman who awakens, but creates a resonance of consciousness that reaches the whole. Jung explained that the individual who achieves individuation becomes a point of light that reorganizes the chaos around them, acting as a catalyst for the maturation of others. When you choose deep reconstruction, you are planting the seeds of a new paradigm based on self-respect, clarity, and absolute, non-negotiable dignity. The legacy of your inner sovereignty is proof that light always triumphs over shadow in the heart of those who decide to inhabit the naked truth of themselves. Your silent strength now emanates an authority that dispenses with words, serving as a silent invitation for other women to also seek their own spiritual liberation. Spiritual awakening is contagious, and your reconstruction is the unwavering testimony that epic rebirth is the destiny of those who forgive themselves fully and completely. The journey of overcoming these final stages of pain transforms into a beacon for those still walking in the fog of emotional devaluation and systemic manipulation. The queen of herself understands that her brilliance is not only for her own glory, but an offering of healing to the wounded and weary collective unconscious. The reconstruction of joy is the hymn you sing through your integrity and unwavering boundaries, disarming hatred and attracting true reciprocity. Jung saw in the sacred feminine the womb of conscious civilization, and your emotional shift is evidence that a new era of spiritual sovereignty is being born. You now inhabit a level of existence where your vitality is protected by a noble purpose, ensuring that your light will never again be extinguished by worldly shadows. Ultimate liberation is the realization that your healing is an act of freedom and a sacred ritual of worship to divine life in glory and peace. To inhabit the legacy of sovereignty requires you to maintain loving vigilance over your inner garden, not allowing the onslaughts of the external world to shake the rock of peace. The reconstruction of the feminine soul has culminated in the fullness of a consciousness that knows it is complete and no longer accepts participation in circular or mediocre discussions. Spiritual maturity is the silken armor you wear every day, allowing you to flow with life while firmly blocking any disrespect. Jung would be proud to see a soul that faced the abyss and brought back the lantern of truth to illuminate not only its own path, but that of humanity. Your awakening was the birth of this new sovereign being, who now walks with the dignity of one who has won the greatest of all internal battles against dependence. Inner peace is the aroma of your spiritual victory, a perfume that exudes integrity, moral authority, and immeasurable glory before the watchful eyes of the divine universe. This new phase of your existence is marked by permanent positive transformations that dematerialize past traumas, transforming them into raw material for your prophetic and vigilant wisdom. The reconstruction culminates in the certainty that your happiness is paramount and that your heart is a temple where only what is sacred holds undeniable right. Spiritual maturity grants you eyes that see divinity within yourself and others, fostering dialogues grounded in truth, clarity, and mutual respect. You are now the guardian of your own flame, ensuring that your awakening is eternal and that your journey inspires the reconstruction of entire lives in search of meaning. True liberation is the discovery that you are the sovereign phoenix who learned to use the ashes of lovelessness as the foundation for your throne of consciousness. Continue shining with all your innate strength, honor your journey, and live with the fullness of one who has discovered that the oracle of life celebrates your victory today. Upon completing this journey of spiritual awakening, the woman realizes that the desire to rebuild herself was the narrow door through which she passed to find immensity. The reconstruction culminated in the formation of a self-sufficient soul, one that forgives itself and inhabits the present moment, with the majesty of one who has discovered that the gold lies within. Spiritual maturity is the infallible guide that will lead her to horizons of immeasurable light, ensuring that her tomorrow is rich in clarity, peace, and authority. Jung would smile upon contemplating the glory of a consciousness that no longer fragments due to lack, but expands through an abundance of self-respect, dignity, and freedom. Her story is now a manifesto of hope, proving that the soul is indestructible when it decides to walk in the light of its own sovereign and sacred truth before the universe. You are free, you are whole, and your peace is the seal of your eternal victory over all the shadows of lovelessness and emotional manipulation overcome. The final stage of this epic awakening is the full assumption of the eternal throne, where you govern your own psyche with the unwavering authority of one who has integrated light and shadow. Jung revealed that sovereign consciousness is the prize of those who have crossed the emotional desert and refuse to be less than what their sacred and divine essence demands today. Inner sovereignty is no longer a goal to be achieved through struggle, but the firm ground beneath your feet, the rock of self-respect where your life flourishes. The reconstruction culminates in the realization that the unconditional peace you inhabit is your greatest wealth and your ultimate protection against the onslaughts of immature minds. If you feel the weight of this crown of clarity on your chest and are ready to seal your ultimate liberation from debilitating patterns, subscribe to the channel now and become part of this community that is growing every day and helping countless people. To inhabit this eternal throne means that you are now the sole and absolute guardian of your own vitality, deciding with unwavering wisdom who deserves the privilege of your presence. The reconstruction of the feminine soul has reached the pinnacle of spiritual glory, transforming the scars of the traumatic past into jewels of prophetic wisdom that now adorn your new sovereign identity. Spiritual maturation has brought the realization that awakening is the supreme state of grace for those who have forgiven themselves and freed themselves from all past chains. Jung taught us that the goal of life is to become who we are in sacred essence, and occupying this throne is the spiritual evidence that you have fulfilled your mission. Your silent strength now emanates from an inexhaustible source of pure truth, ensuring that your light shines forever in the sky of your own full consciousness. The victory of sovereignty manifests itself in the tranquility of one who no longer needs to fight against the shadows, for their mere integrity disintegrates them upon the first vibrational contact. The reconstruction culminated in the formation of a diamond-like consciousness, unbreakable in the face of worldly and social pressures that seek to control and silence the sacred and awakened feminine. You celebrate your epic rebirth, recognizing that each hour of solitude processing the pain was the necessary setting for your throne of clarity to be forged. Spiritual maturity is the seal of your definitive emotional independence, allowing you to navigate seas of immeasurable freedom and a full, life-transforming divine purpose. You now walk with the majesty of one who has overcome the eclipse of devaluation and victoriously occupied their rightful place in conscious life. In this final stage of conscious glory, the closing of the cycle with the old control pattern is felt as a distant footnote, a memory of a voiceless character. The reconstruction of peace has ended in the fullness of a being who inhabits the now with radiant intensity, radiating a security that inspires the awakening of all souls. The inner sovereign is now the master of her own destiny, drawing each new dawn with the colors of integrity, full spiritual authority, and self-love. Her journey is the manifesto of the victory of the human soul over the currents of severe emotional immaturity, serving as the eternal beacon that guides seekers of truth. Continue inhabiting your magnitude, honor your awakening, and shine with all the strength of one who has discovered that the treasure of existence resides in the majestic silence of their soul. Your peace is the seal of your eternity, the guarantee that your light will never be extinguished by worldly lies or by the lack of awareness of others on your new path. The reconstruction ended in the glory of seeing a new consciousness take its place on the altar of awakened life, shining eternally under the unwavering light of the sacred self. Spiritual maturity is the hymn of your freedom, a song of love for yourself that resonates throughout the universe, announcing that you are the guardian. May your journey be light, may your clarity be absolute, and may your awakening be the light that points the way to truth for all beings. Inhabit your eternal throne, govern your destiny with self-respect, and shine forever in the glory of your unconditional, sacred, and divine sovereignty before radiant eternity.